Hey everyone, my name is Brooke Cerda. I'm starting a new channel. They took down all the content I have. Tens of thousands of videos. So this is bilingual. So you see some videos that are different language. So today is Thursday, April 16, 2020, and I went to Costco and it was like 2 hours just to get in Costco. I went to the one in Regal Park, so I was glad that I brought in my book that I have for a while, and I read a little bit and just like it's a lot to read from it. I mean, it from a sense is that this is the greatest crime ever committed in the history of humanity. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, I don't think there's anything else like this. Just we're talking about the beautiful people who gave us everything we got today. Civilization. We are, the world is one civilization, and then there's the Euroasiatics that are always going against nature. From day one, they declare war against nature. So it is kind of like, I mean, unbelievable. I mean, like, how can you be like? I mean, just as a side note, I just picked. I thought I decided to try my luck. Just I picked whatever line, to pay at the register at Costco, and our line wasn't moving for an hour. There was people I saw like behind us in another lane. I think they call it lane. I don't know why. So they all paid up like half an hour, 45 minutes before we did. So these are really crazy times, with the panic they're creating, with the media, their media, about this SARS, virus. This a 2019 version, and so it is kind of like, so. I mean, like, I guess it's not a good example because yeah, sometimes it's like you don't know what to expect. You don't know, like, the whole is this really weird energy in the street everywhere you go. But I told three of their employees, Costco's, I said, it's like we are just, we was left here. I don't know why our lane is not moving for over an hour. And then a guy was like, he said like, okay, so just be patient, whatever. So he came back like half an hour later, like 20 minutes later, and he saw us like say, oh, let me see what's going on. Did not do nothing. So finally I was like, okay, let me go get a manager. It's like, I asked even the people, is there a manager? It's like supervisor. Oh yeah, they're the ones with the walkie talkies. It's like, instead of like saying, what's going on, let me take you, whatever, just really crazy. And when I was waiting in the parking lot, for 2 hours, I just keep thinking like, how people, they can go postal, they even have a name, going postal. So it's just like, I say like, well, I hope there's like nobody, and everybody was very calm. Everybody was very calm, just like I was glad, but especially being in a parking lot, I was just like, especially when we went up the ramp, I was just like standing right by the door. I was like saying, "Oh, some crazy ass motherfuckers gonna come with their car." I mean, it's just like, I don't know. Well, it's only been 2 months, not even 2 months of this shit. So, and they've been enforcing it only for like a month. So it's still not that bad. So it's just like, I mean, that's just a side note that I'm making, just to tell you, like, it was very hard for me to believe. We was there for an hour and we saw everybody pass by, and nobody say a damn word. Nobody say a damn word. We're just standing there, with our shopping cart, and just like. So I never really understood that part of humanity. whatever that. You don't have to be confrontational, everything, but definitely you gotta let them know. It's just like our lane is not moving. We see the next lane that is going really fast. So, and it turned out, I was like two people before my turn. So I went, I saw there was like five managers, because they all had the walkie-talkie. So I assumed they was just standing there with no face mask, nothing. It was just chit-chatting. I was like, and I told them, like this can be like, this country is crazy, just like I don't, let's not create any situation more, and let's monitor the people. If somebody is like, we saw a case in India, this guy who was quarantined. um, I'm not sure. I think he got the virus or some shit. Just like, so he left, and he beat a woman to death. So I don't know. That sounds like a cracker to me. Just it's just really, really crazy. So it's like I try not to go out as much as as I can, but they only sold me one. They have a tuna fish deal. You get like $12. You get 12 cans of tuna. There's like a brand name. I'm not gonna give a brand name. It's a pretty good deal. It's not white. It's kind of like pink, but I guess people don't like it. I don't know. That's why they give it much cheaper. But it's like, I don't care. It just make me feel better when I have cans of shit that like, well, if something was to happen, you can stock up. But it was only sold one deal, so I got 10 cans, and I had like 5 cans in the cabinet. I had to go buy chickpeas. All my doctor said the directives gone. They're gone. I mean, like, I'm eating bread, like, I buy the freaking baguettes they got, and I take out all the white stuff. I make a whole bowl of that white shit and put it in the toilet. Ugh, sorry, like everybody, like, I don't know why I'm coughing now. I'm glad I didn't cough out on the street, because sometimes I get so like, if you cough or something, it's just like everybody was like, oh, So I was like, I'm glad that I don't know where that came from. So anyway, I'm so glad that I live by myself. I can imagine how challenging it is for people that live with their families. So there got to be something good about living alone, right? So, so I was reading. I got to read to page 35. Yeah. So I'm just gonna tell you some of the notes, because I just like to talk to, like, even for myself. I know I'm not getting any views, basically, which that's okay. I don't even care, about that, because um, they just take out the content whenever they want to. So it's just like, and I just don't have any expectations. Let's just say that, I don't have any expectations. I do that, and just like, if I don't have any subscribers, I don't have any subscribers. It's like, I believe that's God's thing to do, or that's your thing to do. Also, whoever find a video, if they like it, they can share it, whatever. I mean, they don't have to share them. I don't want to, like, who the hell am I? I didn't even finish high school, so it's just like, but talk about it. Talk about it, read it. The whole point of this is like, you gotta read it. He spent 16 years of his life. Um, I'm talking about the amazing Chancellor Williams, Dr. Chancellor Williams, and he just died recently. I mean, like in the 90s. He died at 98 years old, and I'm like, I've been looking for interviews, and I haven't really found, like, I haven't even watched any. I think I watched one interview like 5 years ago, and stuff, But I mean, anybody who is in their decolonization journey, anybody who's in a mental decolonizing journey, I don't care what country you're from, This book is a must. This book is a must. It's a labor of love. This man, he risked his life going throughout the world, um, asking questions, finding out. Even like when he got to South Africa in the middle of apartheid in the 70s, brutal, he was talking about like he was in a car, first, he was in, oh my God, because they changed the names, that they changed them and then they changed them back, to African names. Ro- Rhodesia, sounds like stuff like that. And so they gave him a hard time, and he's like, oh, okay, I'm leaving. I'm just like, I'm just gonna write down this country did not allow any historians, any researchers, like. So they got kind of like, like, oh, so like, I don't know, but he ended up having a United States escort, a car. He was saying that, and this is why it's like, it made me so angry, that he said there was like, just saw that he was black, and they was like immediately, coming at him, until they saw the United Slaves, whatever logo or whatever, it just, and this was, I don't believe apartheid really left. It just mutated like everything else, just anyone who make a deal with the damn crackers is an idiot. I'm sorry, it's just like lies and lies and lies. But I just wanted to show you a little bit, the notes that I created. I hope it's not going to turn into like a 3 hour thing. Um, he talked about when he went to Oxford, and he learned, it's like, how Oxford, it's supposed to be like, the holy grail of education. It's supposed to be like the best, and just like, and how did it get to be like that, So I got some a little bit of the audiobook here.
The European Journey. I arrived in England in the fall of 1953 to begin formal studies at Oxford University.
He said there was only like two or three black people in there, and completely ignored, teaching lies and everything. In 1953, imagine, it was like, they all sat down and just listened to infuriating shit, and just like can only imagine, but the determination of this man, um, I want more interviews, I want to, and he died 98 years old. There's gotta be interviews. There's gotta be like, conversations. There's gotta be, I would pay $1,000 because I don't have money, to listen to a conversation between Dr. Chancellor Williams, Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben Yakin. It's just like, can you imagine? I mean, it's like, just to have them. This is why I never read this book, really. I mean, I bought it like 3 years ago. I think this is the book I bought from um, Dr. Jeffries. I went to an event, and he got books, and it's just like, and he got this book. I think it wasn't this book. I think it was Chick. But he got this book too, but I think I bought the one from Chick Antodia. Another great scholar, and even today it is very scary to go around, saying, even if you're a nobody. Now can you imagine if you're a professor and you're like, rejecting lies, you're rejecting all these, he talked like that, just like everybody, it's so complacent with European lies and stuff. So yeah, and he did a very thorough. Let's listen to him. He did a very thorough um, investigation. He went to Europe first because he wanted to know. It's like, how this shit got so bad for black people throughout the whole world. So he wanted to go like, oh, what, make Oxford, and just uh, and he found out, like, you know this, by creating this aristocracy, this education aristocracy, or something like that he called it, you know that automatically, like, they know human nature is like, so many want to get in, so many want to get in. Oh my god, they got the knowledge, they got the education, and and they keep doing that until now. I mean, thank God that is just, it's not, people are starting to wake up and starting to say, like, no, don't go to white universities if you want to learn the truth, more and more. And I hope, but this is like, if we don't act quickly, they will just mutate into something else, which they have mutated. Universities, like, right now, it's just like, they want to pay you just to go there, and just take a class, or they have events. I didn't even know that universities, they have events, and it's like, you can go. It's just like, they're free for anybody, even if you didn't go to school and shit. It's just like, well, it's like, what is this like? Why this urgency now? When I knew that well, I supposedly was gonna graduate high school in 1983, 84. So I mean, like, I ended up passing because over there, because you can pay, yeah, this summer course. And if you pay that, was very expensive summer course, it's like, they pass you. I mean, like, you have like 10 subjects, they're all math and chemistry and shit. It's like, no, I think I had like 20 subjects, but they give you your diploma. It was like, so anyway, so let's listen to him.
Primarily through the Institute of Colonial Studies and at Rhodes House, which might be more properly called Africa House. In addition to the study of documentary sources on Africa, I had other objectives. One, I wanted a more direct, close-up view of the European mind, its real attitude toward the Black world. Two, the extent to which European wealth and power were derived directly from Africa. Three, the nature and philosophy of the European education that was shaping and determining the mentality of Africans. For I was already fully aware of the disastrous effects of the white American education system on Black Americans who, not having any other frame of reference, had to adopt the ideologies and viewpoints of the whites to survive at all, even when these viewpoints are against themselves. This meant visiting various classrooms in elementary and secondary schools, teacher training institutes, and classrooms of lecturers and professors in a selected number of colleges in the universities. Note, the term Black was given a rebirth by the Black Youth Revolt. As reborn, it does not refer to the particular color of any particular person, but to the attitude of pride and devotion to the race whose homeland from times immemorial was called the land of the Blacks. Almost overnight, our youngsters made Black co-equal with white in respectability and challenged the anti-Black Negroes to decide on which side they stood. This was no problem for many who are light or even near white in complexion, for they themselves were among the first to proclaim with pride, "Call me Black." Those who hate the term but hold the majority of leadership positions feel compelled to use it to protect their leadership roles. End of note. These were not look-in and leave visits, but all-day studies at the schools visited, remaining throughout the period in the classrooms and talking with students, teachers, and principals thereafter. In such a study, one learns very quickly that the textbooks and other works describing education do not tell the same story as the schools in action tell. 4. Finally, I wanted to know, and again from direct study, exactly what made Oxford probably the greatest university in the world. What are the specific elements of that greatness? Was great teaching a factor? And if so, who are the great teachers? Nature or teaching? Or, in short, what made them great teachers? From just the foregoing aims of the study, it must be obvious that I was still examining various aspects of the probable reasons why the whites became the masters of the globe. In both France and England, I found that the system of education fostered a new kind of aristocracy, an aristocracy of the educated. College graduates constituted the new upper classes. The son of a carpenter or a railroad conductor became estranged from his family and former friends upon receiving his university degree. A case in point was J.L., a young Englishman in my college at Oxford, Lincoln, and who was one of my close friends there. He refused to go home during any of the long vacation breaks because, to quote him, I can no longer associate with my family and old friends. Wouldn't know how to talk with them. We have nothing in common now, you know. This British and European philosophy of education fitted in ideally with those Africans from the continent and elsewhere who, unlike J.L., came to Europe from the privileged class at home. Some of those studying in England became more British than the British, just as many from what was French West Africa became more French than the Frenchmen.
That's what I'm talking about. The ones that they create this aristocracy, and just like, oh my God, just because the people they say, like, oh my God, this professor, this got doctorate, and now it's just everybody still want to get education even when there's no jobs. It's crazy. I'm talking about in 2020. There's no jobs, whatever. Instead of learning a trade, that will allow you to open your own business, like cooking or something, that it will lead you, and also when you're in whatever, in culinary school, whatever, that's when people should be socializing and networking. You go out of school and it's like, you spot the ones who don't want to just get a job. You spot the ones who actually want to open their own business and make their own empire. It's a very, very cruel mentality, and everybody fall for it. I used to cry because I have no education. It's talking about, it's just like, oh my God, it's like, see, my doctor, my sister is a doctor. My doctor's sister, no, my sister is a doctor, and it's like, and always, like, she was like sometimes shady about that, and she was like very, she wouldn't talk to me about nothing because she would think like I was retarded or something. And so that was very, very painful for a while. I couldn't even tell you this much without even crying. I was like, and now I'm so grateful. I didn't get their poison. I didn't get the garbage. And you can get it yourself. I'm only 55 years old. Hopefully, if I stay more focused, I'm managing my ADD, so I can actually learn the truth. If I can do it, somebody, that really, I mean, English is my second language. I mean, I write it like, you know, really bad, Now they have the spelling correctors and all stuff, which they help a lot, but still you have to learn the, whatever they call syntaxes, something like that, but they don't have taxi cabs or something. No, that's something different.
First tragedy to note about the effects of this class education on blacks is that it further reinforced colonialism's policy of perpetual disunity in Africa and elsewhere.
It is crazy. It is crazy why people they keep sending their children to universities, only to like, creating sellouts, I just recently found out, my father is a fascist. It's just like I say, I wasn't really reading and stuff, but my sister, she read. She could have told me, like, well, I didn't even know what fascism was. I mean, I kind of like knew, I knew the Nazis and stuff, but I know, like, my father was a sympathizer, and I realized it's like, oh, he put us in that school, and you know, which is a fascist school. I mean, completely. I was doing the research of the school, And these are the people who after World War II, Germans who came to my hometown, Guadalajara in Mexico. They all this is why it's so everything's so fucked up, like Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay. They all these mother freakers, they think they're white and they're starving. So now we have, for the first time in like 70 years, we have opportunity to actually, I mean, but I don't know. I don't know. Latin America is just very, but we have to make, Latin America one country, because that's our only chance. That's our only chance, to make one government for Latin America and just to watch it with our lives. Just like, instead of be watching all these little governments and all this shit that, like Colombia. Colombia is known as the Israel of Latin America. They allowed, from Obama, President Obama, put 8 military bases in Colombia, a tiny little ass country, because the war on drugs, the drug on wars again. Why am I saying everything backwards?
The line dividing these black upper and middle classes from the black masses and their basic aspirations is more rigidly drawn, and this superior class mentality, becoming even more crystallized since independence, is an almost certain guarantee of future uprisings on a scale never seen. The second great tragedy is in the nature of what is called education. It is merely rote learning, the ability to memorize phrases, concepts, and other required data. Thinking is neither required nor expected. Critical analysis and evaluation of subject matter are not required, but the ability to absorb and recall is required. The brilliant scholar, then, is one who can readily quote authorities and remember well his bibliographical sources. So we have,
and that was just that. I got to have that, and that was that was part of why I was such a failure, because I couldn't memorize all that shit. Just like, I would have been an actress probably. I could have been a good actress. I could have memorized the freaking lines, and all that stuff. Just like, and I didn't know they had like this thing in the ear, but that's what it was. It was only now that Google is coming out. Now they're like, now they change all the universities now. Now you don't have to memorize shit. Now it's like all you gotta do is like, supposedly they have to think. That's why they created this thing like they call philosophy. So it's like people are like, oh no, it's just that it's a bad philosophy. No, all philosophy is bad philosophy because it's from the crackers. So you're already starting with a false foundation. You say like, oh, this is not European. Yes, that's European. I mean, like, even if it like let's say like you want to have clean water, and you start with a fucking dirty glass, and the water already have some shit in it. So it's really horrible.
a generation of black scholars who continue to amaze students by mouthing the doctrines and viewpoints of their white teachers, like so many robots without minds of their own.
Yeah, well, we got Oprah Winfrey, stuff like that. She do the book club. She do like all that stuff, and they get very rewarded. This handful of billionaire tokens, but they cannot do anything. I mean, there was also Unite, just Oprah, Jay-Z, Beyonce, who else? Byron Allen, whatever. They could just buy, a whole state, in the United Slaves. But it's just like, oh no, they're not allowed to do that. That's how you know that shit is a hoax. It's just like they are just puppets. They are very wealthy and everything, but they don't own their money. They don't own anything. They have to ask permission for everything.
Yet study under white teachers and professors should be most rewarding. And it can be if you do not enter white institutions with a head like an empty pitcher going to a fountain to be filled. I was safe and richly rewarded during my studies in white universities only because I happened not to be so naive that I expected the viewpoints of the conquerors to be the same as those of the conquered on matters relating to our place in the world. Elsewhere, I have emphasized by repetition that some of the most fruitful sources for study came quite unintentionally from white scholars. A case in point was at Oxford. The course was The History of Colonialism in Africa. The presence of two or three blacks in the class, while obviously uncomfortable to some, was generally ignored, for African studies were of long standing as an integral part of the imperial system. They were not planned for Africans at all, but for the future administrators of the empire in Africa. So Professor Madden was pointing out in his lecture how difficult and even impossible it was to rule Africans in view of their wild and most primitive system of democracy. For
Yeah, we had that, we had like, for the first time in 70 years, we was able to elect our first president in Mexico. So yeah, but all the other candidates, there was Harvard, there was Yale, there was and actually one of the candidates did not even live in Mexico. He lived in Atlanta. He still live in Atlanta. Talking about Juan Guaido, some idiot, pimple face idiot, who was told, oh, you self-proclaim yourself president of Venezuela in the street, in the middle of the street. He self-proclaimed himself president of Venezuela. 5 minutes later, you have the White House saying that, oh, we got a new president in Venezuela, just like that. So you think that he actually got a mind of his own? You're like, when has that ever happened? When has that ever happened? I mean, I come out in the street and say, I'm a president of the United States, and, I'm not going to get no government to acknowledge me. Probably not even the Mexican government will acknowledge me. But this motherfucker immediately got 50 countries, 50, I don't know, slaves, I guess, of the United slaves, including, well, the European Union was never actually confirmed because there was some resistance, thank God. But anyway, even if they didn't, they was counted. They're still counting 50 countries, even when a lot of countries, they keep addressing him as, opposition, a leader of the opposition. That's what they say now. But other countries, they still call him president, even have no power, no nothing. It's like, it is very, very frustrating. This is why I'm like, I don't actually get sad when people, I see like on Twitter, oh shit, I got a tuition, I got a scholarship, I got this to go to college, to university. It was like, and sure enough, I have followed some people on Twitter, and like 2 3 years in college is like they're already like blogging, like it's another totally different person, and all they care about money. Oh, I gotta get paid. I gotta get paid. Or it's like, if I don't do, like, I gotta get paid or whatever. It's like, really? Yeah, because this generation is like, it's not. Oh, hell no, we don't pay dues. We just go straight to high management, and that's it. And if they don't pay us what we want, we just go someplace else. Especially the feminists, they go like, oh, you don't have enough women, so I'm gonna sue you that you don't have women and you discriminate against me, like. And that's how a lot of women are getting the job. I'm finding out by threatening these corporations, and they just become tokens, and they don't care. They don't care as long as they're like, oh, I'm a manager, I'm a director, I'm a like whatever. It just, that's ridiculous. They have no power. They have no power whatsoever. They have to do what they say, and if they want actual power, they actually have to make a scene. You have to threaten them, like sexual harassment, like a Me Too kind of thing. That's how a lot of women are getting ahead, and that's something that nobody want to talk about.
Just as fast as African kings or chiefs undertook to carry out British laws which displeased the people would remove them from office. Therefore, this primitive African democracy had to be destroyed before the British system of indirect rule could be effective. The point here is that these sneering remarks by an eminent British historian reveal to me an entirely new field of research.
Wow, you see, and then like he's so concise and like this is why I wanted this is the line that actually I want to say, like, let me get in front of the camera. I'm gonna play it again because it's just like, how they pumped whenever they feel it's convenient these aristocratic, knowledgeable, I mean, educated class, and then when they don't, then like I say, they wanted to change into the system of covert, presidents, like I say, 70 years in Mexico we went through that. They're all agents working for the United Slaves.
That lecture led me into the study of true disunity in Africa and elsewhere. The line dividing these black upper and middle classes from the black masses and their basic aspirations is more rigidly drawn, and this superior class mentality, becoming even more crystallized since independence, is an almost certain guarantee of future uprisings on a scale never seen. The second great tragedy is in the nature of what is called education. It is merely rote learning, the ability to memorize phrases, concepts, and other required data. Thinking is neither required nor expected. Critical analysis and evaluation of subject matter are not required, but the ability to absorb and recall is required. The brilliant scholar, then, is one who can readily quote authorities and remember well his bibliographical sources. So we have a generation of black scholars who continue to amaze students by mouthing the doctrines and viewpoints of their white teachers, like so many robots without minds of their own. Yet study under white teachers and professors should be most rewarding, and it can be if you do not enter white institutions with a head like an empty pitcher going to a fountain to be filled. I was safe and richly rewarded during my studies in white universities only because I happened not to be so naive that I expected the viewpoints of the conquerors to be the same as those of the conquered on matters relating to our place in the world. Elsewhere, I have emphasized by repetition that some of the most fruitful sources for study came quite unintentionally from white scholars. A case in point was at Oxford. The course was The History of Colonialism in Africa. The presence of 2 or 3 blacks in the class, while obviously uncomfortable to some, was generally ignored, for African studies were of long standing as an integral part of the imperial system. They were not planned for Africans at all, but for the future administrators of the empire in Africa. So Professor Madden was pointing out in his lecture how difficult and even impossible it was to rule Africans in view of their wild and most primitive system of democracy. For just as fast as African kings or chiefs undertook to carry out British laws which displeased the people would remove them from office. Therefore, this primitive African democracy had to be destroyed before the British system of indirect rule could be effective. The point here is that these sneering remarks by an eminent British historian reveal to me an entirely new field of research. That lecture led me into the study of one of the most significant developments in the entire history of the black race, an ancient system of democracy existing before Greece, evolved from a continent-wide constitution that governed the whole African people as a single race. This all-important finding was arrived at by comparative studies of African customary laws in every region of the continent. The Europeans were confronted with a real social democracy that existed long before the terms socialism and democracy were invented in the West. For Dr. Madden, it was savage because the people were the real rulers, in fact, and not merely in theory. The field studies. Insofar as the study of African history is concerned, I regard direct investigation in the field and in Africa as of the highest importance. This fieldwork should be undertaken only after thoroughgoing research in written and other documentary sources. The study of available written sources, their evaluation, and the mounting archaeological records are all the first major phase of African research, and I would say a prerequisite for fieldwork. The fieldwork was mainly concerned with oral history. I had noted in my study of sources of noted historians that many who decried oral tradition as unreliable never failed to use it themselves to supplement or give added validity to their works. The fact is that neither written nor unwritten records should be accepted as true without verification. Although 2 years were devoted to the fieldwork, the ground covered was possible only because of careful advanced planning and the scheduling of areas and groups in each country months ahead of my arrival. These had to be in the hinterland, or bush country, generally far away from the westernized urban centers. For our quest was not for the long standing tradition of either Islam or Christianity in Africa, but for the more ancient tradition of Africa itself. So vast and untapped is the real history of the African race that I myself only scratched the surface of what is yet to be done. Some of the areas to be explored by future historians are set forth in pages which follow in this chapter. A major research project should not be undertaken by a single individual. This was my mistake. Hence, the 16 years of work that a research team of 8 or 10 persons might complete in 3 or 4.
Yeah, that was he explained, that it should have been like he should have a big budget and everything, but at the same time, it was just so much, if it's divided, the if the non-white world is divided right now, can you imagine? And yeah, the 1950s, the 1950s. The book, I think it was not published, 16 years. You make them, you do the math. So let me see what I was gonna. Yeah, I rewinded too much. It's like but I wanted to hear that part. How they the real democracy. Even in Mexico, we still have it today. We still have it today, especially in the South. Um, we have still indigenous nations that even to vote, their own system of voting, and it takes the whole day. And the representatives, they have to be like, and it is amazing. It's amazing. Even like they talk about our emperors, like Tlatoanis. That's what it was called in Nahuatl. And he was not, like they say, I mean, emperor in that sense, yes, but not in the absolute monarchy. He had to answer to the Senate. There was no called Senate, but there was like 3 or 4 chambers. He could not make a decision for himself. He talked about, I think it was in Abyssinia, Ethiopia, that the crackers was get so frustrated because they had to wait 2-3 weeks to see the president, or the emperor, and it was just like I say, like he got to see one time that the prime minister, I don't know if they call it prime minister. I don't think they call it. And I don't know what it was called in Africa, but it was like, it's let's call it prime minister for the sake of this. He was out of town, so they had to wait for the prime minister then to have the meeting to authorize to see. He could not see. He could not see. The king, the emperor, could not see anybody without authorization. Could not talk to nobody without the authorization of all these chambers, the the prime minister, all these. And so they took all that. That now they call it democracy. They call it. They butchered that system, the African system, and they made it into. Everything is now symbolic. You have symbolic power of, when you vote, even when the machines are already rigged and everything. It's amazing. This book, we all should read it like every 5 years, because then you get so much stuff you didn't get. You see, I left some notes. Yeah, he put in 9 questions that kind of like structure some of his work. Yeah, it was known as, he said at one point. He might say it right now. At one point, he said it's like, no matter what, when the Asiatics, came to Kemet, and you know, and they married with some of them, and with now they're like the anti-African, now that we call Arabs and stuff, even until recently, not long ago. Kemet was known as the god, as the land of the gods and the spirits. Even the most anti-African, anti-black, and whatever, they still knew, Kemet was the land of the blacks, because that's what he meant, and the land of the gods and the spirits. So right off the bat, it's like just nothing barbaric. There's nothing unsophisticated about the African people. It's just that, a lot of the African people, they still, thank God, they keep this very strong connection with nature, with God. So obviously, for the cracker who is just, like I say, declare war against nature, and want to immediately, the first thing they want to do is just, uh, put pave pave the land, asphalt, and just nothing that remind nature. If they wanted, they want to make a park. They have a little garden, their backyard, with little grass, and that's all they can handle when it comes to nature. A lot of times, So um, I think I'm almost finished with the selections I have. Yeah, he talk about, page there 29. This elite, ruling class, with the light skin, the light skin that they're like. He found, everywhere he went to, most of the African countries he went, and he found the same thing. The scholars from Harvard and whatever, scholars, quote unquote scholars, it was very pale.
And all this advanced work saved for the study itself is obvious. But volunteer work of our African brothers who accompanied me into the field was what I referred to above as unforgettable. Some of these were teachers who, as in the case of my previous field work, 1956 57, had secured leave for the purpose without any trouble at all. Indeed, even the people we call illiterate had that storehouse of wisdom which made it easy for them to understand that I was working not for myself, but for them, for the whole black race. I am trying to make it clear here that although I did not have the kind of research team referred to above, many people, 128 in number, participated in this work and made the outcome possible. So when at various places I say we, it is not the editorial or royal we, but reference is made to individuals and groups that actually worked on various parts of the study. However, I had to decline the services of many highly recommended Africans because of their upper class attitudes toward the common people. For I had learned quite early that the people in the interior can spot the arrogant and superior African just as easily as they recognize the arrogant and superior white investigator. They will give answers to questions readily enough, but not the right answers. I therefore selected only those whose heartbeats seemed to be tuned to the heartbeats of the great common people from whom all of us came. The interpreters were generally assistants who spoke two or three of the languages of the country. An entirely new kind of assistant was the verifying interpreter. This is to double check the interpreters, for sometimes they do not convey your question precisely or give back the exact reply. There were training sessions before and during the fieldwork. In those fortunate cases where we had 4 or 5 competent assistants, one of the interpreters remained with me, while the others worked on special assignments in different places in the area. The documentary research preceding all this in the United States was not done entirely alone. Some of the most important areas of my study of ancient sources were rechecked in independent studies by a select group of graduate students in history. Their assistance in reappraising such early sources as Manetho, Herodotus, Josephus, Strabo, Abu Saleh et al. Was invaluable. Foremost among these were Reverend Carlton J. Hayden and Mr. Donald W. Key Hefner. In concluding my remarks on the field studies in Africa, some comments on 4 of the countries visited are in order. In the Sudan, the authorities did not want me to work in or even visit the all-black southern provinces. Their 15 years of rebellion against the Arab North caused the whole vast area to be officially sensitive and therefore barred to outsiders. The suggestion was that I confine my studies to the northern Sudan. This I refused because I had been previously assured that the rebellion had been completely crushed and that peace and quiet prevailed everywhere. Besides, I could only find Islamic institutions in the north, institutions of which I already had full knowledge by years of special study and teaching. As indicated above, the American embassy in Khartoum did none of the preparatory work about which I give the U.S. embassies throughout Africa so much praise, although it had 6 months' notice before my arrival, and they maintained a strictly hands-off policy after my arrival. I therefore prepared to leave at once, but announced that I do not beg to study anywhere, and that the world would learn that this was the only African state where an African scholar was barred. The Ministry of the Interior reacted swiftly. Not only was permission to do field work in the South quickly granted, but all the necessary arrangements were made with dispatch. This included establishing my southern headquarters at Malakal. The simple fact was that while they were quite familiar with European research people roaming freely all over the country, a black doing field studies in the Sudan is a phenomenon indeed. Ethiopia, the new name for Abyssinia, like the Republic of the Sudan, is also ruled by people of mixed blood who not only do not consider themselves African by race, but who maintain a privileged class society based upon color. To them, all black-skinned Africans are Bantu. To these, they feel superior by reason of white blood, and their discriminatory practices are just as subtle and real as those of the whites. And although the enslavement of black-skinned Africans continue in both countries, even in our times, both the Sudan and the new Ethiopia have adopted the Brotherhood Front since the sudden rise of so many independent African states. The Sudan to serve as the bridge between the Arab world and the new black states, and thus control or influence their international policies through the UN, and Ethiopia to more directly control or influence Black Africa through Western backing in establishing the headquarters of the Organization of African Unity in Addis Ababa and pushing Haile Selassie into the key role of continent-wide leadership, thus blocking the, quote, dangerous influence of Kwame Nkrumah. It is because of my steadfast refusal to either skip or gloss over these aspects of the historical record that I am criticized by many Negroes, and I know exactly when to use this term.
We see the same dynamic, W.B. Du Bois against the most honorable Marcus Garvey. We see Dr. King, even when he came around, but the great damage was already done against the Honorable Malcolm X, right? We see the Honorable Louis Farrakhan against Dr. Khalif Abdul Mohammed that ended up in his murder. I made a whole program on my other channel. Now it's gone. About like I had all this research and stuff. I don't want to like talk too much because it's like I don't have proof. There's no proof, I think, of a lot of things. I think even when there's proof, like there's proof that Dr. King, survived the assassination attempt, but was smothered in his hospital bed. It's just like, and still, it really don't make any difference. That's very frustrating when they said the truth will set you free. It was like, no, 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 no. I mean, organizing strategies, weapons, wealth, all that combined, it's just like, like the way I see it, the best, most viable way to um, to weaken them is just to with lawsuits. If everybody have a lawsuit, I mean, like Mexico we have a million lawsuits that we could do against the United States, but it's just like it's not the right time. It's not the right time. We had already like a complaint from Venezuela this year. They filed a complaint, or I don't even know what it's called, at the United Nations because of the sanctions, and because the United States government's been shameless about wanting to destabilize the government and just talking about all that stuff. And they gave a testimony, because for the first time in a long time, Venezuela has made it into the United Nations. So it's just like very slow progress, and then and then you got like boom, 20 steps back again. It is extremely, extremely frustrating, that just like I'm not even attempting to comment on His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie, and without a contextualization and stuff. But I know it's part of everybody. It's part of everybody. If you wanna make it, you know, 20 steps ahead. If you wanna go ahead, you have to compromise something. Compromise something. I mean, that's. There was this. You see, when I read that, what we just heard, right? When what I referred to above as amusing were incidents such as excited policemen rushing to flag down the big Cadillac because they could so quickly spot a black face before they saw the seal of the United States emblazoned on the sides of the car with um, blood spangled banner flying from the hood. And that is the black experience. That is like, at this point, it's just I think it's just so much compounded trauma. So this is the other part of the black autocrat, which I have no idea what I mean. Autocrat, autocrat. I don't know how you pronounce it. The account went on had the presumption to keep white men waiting in order to show his people how high and mighty he was. The whites were denied even brief audience, while the king would quickly receive any black that wandered in from the countryside. Now the explorer, without knowing it, it was actually reporting how African democracy worked and how it had been working before there was even Athens or Greece, where the Westerners believed democracy was born. The explorer would have been surprised to know that king, the king in Africa meant something entirely different from what it meant in Europe and Asia. That this black king, far from putting the heirs, did not have the right to receive them, even socially, without the presence of at least three senior elders. I'm getting emotional because I'm thinking about the massacre, the first massacre in Mexico, 500 years ago. The best of the best, at this university in Cholula, in Puebla. Elders, the wise, as there is in Kemet, there is the principles of Maat in Mexico, in today's Mexico, Tenochtitlan. There's the Toltecayotl. There's the Toltecayotl, which is the blueprint, for living. And it got, to me, in my, ignorance, it sounds a little bit similar to the principles of Maat, the reciprocity, and but that it included, this one included even diet and stuff. And it's been just basically just released like 50 years ago. It's like people are like, we started to think, like, because what they did, the crackers they did, they pumping up these Aztecs, which, I mean, they didn't call themselves Aztecs. That was the crackers gave them that name, Aztecs. The Mexica, and it was a wild bunch. That was a wild bunch. They had just arrived. They had just arrived in in Tenochtitlan. What is became Tenochtitlan, Tenochtitlan, whatever. Just like, so these people was not good. The Mexicas, the Aztecs, so-called Aztecs, because they did not even want the Toltecayotl. They wanted to make their own, the Mexicayotl. So, which was based in, you know, some other stuff. And, you know, I mean, it's hard to know who they were because they took it more than 100 years to arrive. So I think this is why people, they say this one of the lost tribes or something, because yeah, it took it more than 100 years to arrive. They even passed by my mom's hometown, and on the way there. So we really don't even know nothing about the Mexicas and the so-called Aztecs. But what we know, it's the Toltecs, which Toltec is not a culture alone. It is a state of consciousness. That's what the Toltecayotl, and that's obviously Olmec, so-called Olmec. The Tomoancan people, African people. I mean, it's just so many similarities. It's like it just really don't matter how much people they read. You know, uh, Dr. Ivan van Sertima, they came before Columbus. No matter how, like, these people are like. So yeah, I mean, it's been a little bit more than 2 years since I'm full time back. Well, not right now because of this freaking virus that, that's another story. I want to talk about what I found out about this bullshit, this um, homology. This SARS virus, the 2019 SARS virus, have a homology to HIV. It's like it's just crazy. And then they bring Fauci and Briggs to finish the job. They started 30 years ago. I'm like, so so that's that's this model. It's got similarities to the one in Mexico. Um, even 300 years ago. That this black king, far from putting heirs, did not have the right to receive them, even socially, without the presence of at least 3 senior elders. That to consider a petition to conduct explorations in the country. The full Council of State had to be called, and that this could not be done by the king without the advice of the first minister. First minister, well, I said it wrong. I said prime minister. You see how the Eurocentrism, they get to you? Who happened to be on tour when the explorers arrived to the capital, and that the old blacks they saw wandering in from the countryside and immediately given audience were the counselors who had been summoned from some from distant provinces to pass on their requests to explore. They were the direct representatives of the people. The voice of the king was in fact the voice of the people, without which he could not act on any matter of importance or even talk alone with strangers. It should be clear, therefore, that our guidelines to reach must lead to critical analysis of all sources, whether originally secondary or oral. In particular, we should seek out those works with the special mission to prove, to quote unquote, prove the superiority of the whites, quote unquote, whites, by quote unquote, proving the inferiority of the blacks, all in in all in language so subtle, scholarly, and scientific that to the uncritical mind, their quote unquote truths seem self-evident. But it is also noteworthy that while the most hostile, racist writers usually prove the very opposite of what they intend, their work inevitably contain useful factual data that must be accepted. Indeed, it is doubtful where anyone, even a devil, could write a book completely devoid of truth. Yeah, that's like, but a lot of times, how many people we lost like that, like, especially when they offer them a check or something. It's like, it's unbelievable how many people is still like, oh, the crackers are talking to me. They want me to work with them. They want me to work for them. They're like, and people, they get like, really, they're like, oh, And that's all what people aspire, aspire to, to be looked at by the damn crackers. And that's their biggest achievement.
Note: one of the fateful illusions among blacks is that the white world does not know about the very weak areas in the race, which are the basis for its power and control over them. When we reach the point where we begin to seek out and turn the searchlight on the things that divide and hold us back, at that point, the white oppressors will have reason to tremble. The white man stays on the alert, keeping a sharp lookout for any signs of strength and development among the blacks. Exploring for real obstacles to unity would be a disturbing sign of growing strength. End of note. And now, southward to the fully white ruled lands where hostility to a black face was fully expected, Rhodesia and South Africa. Long before reaching Southern Africa, I was told that I might as well skip Rhodesia, and that even if admitted into South Africa, I would not be permitted to work. But Rhodesia, to the surprise of just about everyone, pulled out all stops as though it had resolved to outmatch all the black states in amenities and the various kinds of assistance beyond all expectations or needs. There was the usual press conference, followed by a front page headline coverage of my mission. The other surprise was invitation for TV and radio broadcast to the nation. Our Zimbabwe friends were somewhat suspicious of the motives behind all this red carpet treatment of a black American, especially when it continued after my uncompromising replies to questions on a TV broadcast panel session. The Ministry of the Interior had an interpreter flown 300 miles to join me when I visited his particular language group, the Dembele. The only objectionable incidents were when, on two different occasions in different places, two district officers wanted to attend my meetings with chiefs and the council of elders. I objected, and the matter was closed. Finally, South Africa. The situation in this country is so ridiculous that, far from allowing myself to be incensed with rage, I found it amusing. The unremitting brutality of these whites against the blacks leaves them in a state of permanent fear. They seem to consider every black man not a potential, but an actual threat. And what they are preoccupied with every hour is unbelievable until you are actually in South Africa. My passport was a mistake made somewhere. I, of course, had no intention to do field work in South Africa, but had to pass through it to reach the surrounding countries, then under British rule. No one at all was supposed to be barred from passage to and from these countries, but it required the action of the U.S. ambassador at Pretoria and an angry American consul general at Johannesburg to free me from the airport room where I was held and checked on every 30 minutes. When the consul general arrived in person, the authorities insisted that I must not enter the city but be taken under guard to the train for Swaziland. Mr. Riley, the consul general, then decided to defy South Africa by not only driving me leisurely through Johannesburg, but 200 miles around the country, stopping at different towns and finally on to Switzerland. What I referred to above as amusing were incidents such as excited policemen rushing to flag down the big Cadillac because they could so quickly spot a black face before they saw the seal of the United States emblazoned on the sides of the car or the American flag flying from the hood. An African is a member of the black race, and from times immemorial, he was known as such by all the peoples of the world. Throughout this work, the term refers to blacks only. It should be noted also that I write about the African people, not African peoples, as Western writers do. I am dealing here with essentially one people, one race, if you please, the African race. In ancient times, African and Ethiopian were used interchangeably because both meant the same thing, a black. This, of course, was before the Caucasians began to reorder the earth to suit themselves and found it necessary to stake their birthright over the land of the blacks also. In line with this, Some Western historians have recently wondered where the Africans came from. The reasons given for beginning formal studies of Africa at Oxford implied much more than was stated. Reference was made to studying the Caucasian mind, for therein may be found many clues that lead to a better understanding of the history of the blacks and how the systematic blackout of significant portions of that history occurred. This is why I urge those students who intend to accept the great challenge of basic research in this discipline to go into enemy territory, linger there, study and critically analyze their lectures and their scholarly writings, for they are some of the most rewarding sources for African history, precisely because in the shrewdly attempting to delete, disguise, or belittle the role of the blacks in world history, they often reveal the opposite of what was intended. They are fruitful sources of unconscious evidence, supplying the very evidence they thought to suppress, or recording facts, the significance of which they were totally ignorant. A fairly good example is the written account of a European explorer in East Africa. He was outraged because he and his party had to wait 2 weeks to present requests to explore the country to the African king. The black autocrat, the account went on, had the presumption to keep white men waiting in order to show his people how high and mighty he was. The whites were denied even a brief audience, while the king would quickly receive any old black that wandered in from the countryside. Now the explorer, without knowing it, was actually reporting how African democracy worked and how it had been working before there was an Athens or Greece, where Westerners think democracy was born. The explorer would have been surprised to know, one, that king in Africa meant something entirely different from what it meant in Europe and Asia. Two, that this black king, far from putting on airs, did not have the right to receive them even socially without the presence of at least 3 senior elders. Three, that to consider a petition to conduct explorations in the country, the full council of state had to be called, and that this could not be done by the king without the advice of the first minister, who happened to be on tour when the explorers arrived in the capital. Four, and that the old blacks they saw wandering in from the countryside and being quickly received were the counselors who had been summoned, some from distant provinces, to pass on their request to explore. They were the direct representatives of the people. The voice of the king was in fact the voice of the people, without which he could not act at all on any matter of importance, or even talk alone with strangers. It should be clear, therefore, that our guidelines for research must lead to a critical analysis of all sources, whether original, secondary, or oral. In particular, we should seek out those works with a special mission to prove the superiority of whites by proving the inferiority of blacks. All in language so subtle, scholarly, and scientific that to the uncritical mind their truths seem self-evident. But it is also noteworthy that while the most hostile racist writers usually prove the very opposite of what they intended, their works inevitably contain useful, factual data that must be accepted. Indeed, it is doubtful whether anyone, even a devil, could write a book completely devoid of truth. Research in African history is more tedious, laborious, and time-consuming than is true in other unsuppressed fields. For in developing the underdeveloped history of the blacks, one has to explore the most unlikely sources for a fragment here and a fragment there, and in works in no way concerned with African history, and just as often no kind of history. Sometimes it is a paragraph or two in an explorer's account. At other times, significant items may be found in the numerous missionary reports to the Home Office, explaining the mission's task, but also the native institutions to be overcome. All of these may be valuable and most valid sources, precisely because they were not intended to be such at all. The writers were detailing bigger European interests. Any references to Africans were merely incidental to larger purposes. Just piecing all these fragments together could be a research field by itself. In my work in European and American history, I ran into no such problems and the research tasks were easier. In Egyptian history, to give a final example of Caucasian roadblocks to be overcome, one has the extra time-consuming job of identifying the numerous black giants of history who have been classified and effectively disguised as Caucasians over the centuries. First of all, one must know the various names that refer to blacks exclusively and by which they were known throughout the ancient world. For in addition to the more widely used African and Ethiopians, they were also known as Thebians, Libyans, Thynites, Nubians, Cushites, Memphites, Numidians, etc. Even before white Asians gained the ascendancy in any of these areas, their very presence in relatively small numbers was sufficient to identify them as the leaders and achievers of whatever attracted the attention of the world. Another trick, the very opposite of the American law and practice, was to classify Africans with Caucasian blood as Caucasians. If any of those so classified turned out to be notorious characters, pro African or anti white, they were loudly proclaimed and contemptuously called half breeds. The millions of early blacks who were forced either by circumstances or expediency to replace their own names with Asian and European names only added to the problems of historical identification. Far from becoming baffled and discouraged by the more painstaking basic research required, the student of African history must accept the challenge as a 20th century mandate that is essential to the salvation of the race in the most literal sense. They will need the active support of black governments and predominantly black institutions of learning. These should be actively sponsoring one, comprehensive basic research programs, two, research teams for field studies, especially in history and archaeology, three, and a thoroughgoing teacher training program for history and other related disciplines. What, indeed, are black institutions of learning waiting for? The young people.
Okay. Yeah, this is like, I think that's one of my most it's so frustrating, because I mean, obviously, I don't need to tell you, as an outsider, but I have to say it as an outsider, just this is something I can never understand. Um, I don't know exactly how many they are. I have to watch, because the young cat is overweight, and the older cat, he's 15 years old. He's very sick. His kidneys. So he eat all the food, and he get really overweight. Anyway, so there's like, I don't know, it's like at least 1,000 non-profits, who's supposed to be, focused, and supposed to be like everything, for African Americans, right? Like the NAACP, like the National League, like the National Action Network, like just like the same things with, Latin Americans, and Spics, whatever, Hispanics, whatever, Hispanics, it's just a mess. It's just a mess, and I feel like, to me, it's just like, that's something to look into it. And they was to be forced into like make statements, just like the Jewish Anti-Defamation League. They send a letter, and they're all shaking. But I don't know. I don't know if that is happening or not. I don't know if the NWACP. Well, I was like so ignorant. Like, even like 15 years ago, I thought it's like, because I'm really bad with acronyms. So, but I assumed the NWACP, for a long time. I couldn't even say it. Was for African American. And no, it seems like it's like people of color. So it's just like, oh gosh, that's when I learned, like, so I started suspecting, and then it was like, I was like, watching a lot of the Dr. Khalid Abdul Mohammed, explaining all the betrayal, of the civil rights bill instead of black rights. It's just a tragedy, and a tragedy all over again, and just um, getting so close, like 100 years with the most honorable Marcus Garvey. That broke my heart, especially when I watched the movie, the documentary. It was just like, But I mean, I feel like it's something more feasible, more like easy to be done. To pressure just the way people pressure elected officials to pronounce themselves against something, or to, like, otherwise they will lose their vote, or they will, like, they will give them hell, protesting and everything. Or right now we cannot protest, but you can protest online. You can make petitions. You can make, like, make a lot of noise. So these organizations, they gotta speak up. They gotta speak up. Like, we see all these Chinese organizations crying foul because of the Chinese virus. They saying, oh, that's racist. Oh, that's this and that. Saying Chinese virus. Just like, but they have no problem saying, black humor, the black sheep, a dark side, a dark past. I mean, there's a million of anti-black, um, whatever they're called. Everything, everywhere, is anti-black. Even the black channels that I watch on YouTube, they still, like, the light. It's all about the light. And it's just like, obviously, it's not about the light. Obviously, just because the damn crackers, they just love the light. And that's the first thing they tell you if you speak up. They say, lighten up, lighten up. What's wrong with you? You gotta lighten up. And it just I don't know. I'm an outsider. Whatever I say, of course, it got no meaning. But especially, I love the beach. I mean, like, cannot wait to the. Hopefully, this damn thing is gonna be over by the time they open the beaches, because that would be, like, really tragic. But in the past, like, 10 years, I don't see any African Americans. I don't see no black people at the beach. And when I see them, it's like they got umbrella, they got sunblock, just like the crackers and stuff. It's just like, it's a recipe for disaster. And a lot of African Americans, a lot of black people, they know it take you like 3 hours for the sun to actually, produce vitamin D, for instance, to be like, penetrating. It's not the same as somebody pale. We can burn in the sun in 15 minutes. I don't know. I'm like, the last thing I want to close it with is just like, I was in the train and this song came out. The amazing, Martha Wash. Remember her? She's still, like, I saw her perform even like 5 years ago. Amazing voice. Just because she's voluptuous, whatever. And it's just like, now now they're pushing fatness, like Lizzo and all these people, like, and it's just like, I mean, such an amazing voice, so this is a song that, I heard it in the 90s, and my English is really bad, especially listening. So, one day, I was listening, just like, what are they talking about? What's she talking about? What's she talking about? I bought the whole, maxi single. I think I bought like 5 maxi singles because I was addicted to house music in the 90s. And that's how I would spend all my money. I would go there like, oh, they have new mixes. They have new mixes or whatever, but it's just like, usually those mixes and that kind of music is only good in a club. Like 5 years ago, I bought, in Burlington, they have like speaker systems, like little speakers you put around, and one long one in the middle. It's like $50. It's a sharper image. It's all right. It's all right, but it's not as loud as, and that's okay, because then they freaking call the police, I guess. So that's how I enjoy it. So yeah, and I'm obviously not gonna play it all, because that's then they will take the video down, I guess.
You've been living in the shadows, you've been hiding much too long. You've been upside down and inside out, just trying to get home. You've exhausted your distractions in your question under pain, and you realize the more you try, it still comes out the same. Into the light, into the light, the fire that will walk you through the night. Into the rhythm of the oneness of our soul. You find the answer to the truth you always have. It's written in the stars. It's time to solve the mystery of who you really are. You're the Alpha and Omega. You've been sent to heal the world, and you can't deny the power of your spirit left behind.
Right now, please, right now. It's just like, well, we're about to start the age of Aquarius in December officially, finally. So I'm hoping, we gotta stop. This gotta stop. These lies and lies, and the most brilliant people in the whole world, and a lot of them, they don't even know it. I mean, they know it. It's like they say it, like, go to Harlem, whatever. Yes, yes, but then you gotta stop talking about it and just stop taking your place in the world, your rightful place in the world, and then just this is insanity. This is just like, I mean, it's gotta be about over. It's gotta be about over. This maafa. It's gotta be about over. And I mean, it's like, I just hate that fact. It's like, don't. That's the only part I don't like about the song. Please don't come out of the darkness. Come out of the whiteness. Come out of the whiteness into the dark. That's what we all must do. And there's no such thing as darkness. It's just that we're not able to see, that special light, the special, it's just like, I'm just gonna leave it like this. I'm hoping that if you ever find this video, this video is this 2050, 2065. And damn, 2065, I'm gonna be 100 years old. So yeah, and it's gonna be 100 years since the assassination of the Honorable Malcolm X. And we at least must demand justice for him and his family. Come out of the whiteness into the dark. I will stop. Oh, this is not the video. This is just, I'm playing the videos too. I just check the sound, because the sound sometimes they go out. Come out of the whiteness for real.